The morning my pharmacist called to ask why someone was filling sedative prescriptions under my name, I knew something was deeply wrong. But I never imagined it would lead me here. Standing before 350 guests at my daughter's wedding in our family estate on Battery Row, about to destroy the man I had raised as my son for 20 years. He thought he was stealing my fortune. He never saw my trap coming. But let me go back. Let me tell you how a 64-year-old retired heart surgeon discovered that the boy he had loved since childhood was slowly poisoning him, stealing his fortune, and planning to sell his own sister into a fake marriage. Let me tell you what a father does when the people he trusted most become the people he fears most. 4 weeks before that wedding day, I was sitting in my study on the second floor of our family home, on Battery Row, Charleston, staring at the harbor through windows that had framed Davenport sunrises for 200 years. The morning light caught the water just right, scattering gold across the surface, but I barely noticed. My head was foggy again, thick, like trying to think through wet cotton. I had been blaming grief, blaming age, blaming the emptiness that had settled into every room since Maggie died 18 months ago. My wife, my compass, gone. The phone rang at 7:43 that Tuesday morning. I almost did not answer. My hands felt clumsy, disconnected, the way they had felt too often lately. But the caller ID showed King Street Pharmacy, and something instinctive made me pick up. Mr. Davenport? This is Rachel, at King Street Pharmacy. Her voice carried a note of careful concern. I'm calling because we received a prescription refill request for lorazepam under your name, but it's not matching any script from your primary care physician. The prescribing doctor is a Franklin Webb. I just wanted to verify before we process it. I sat up straighter. Lorazepam. A sedative. A powerful one. I never authorized that prescription, Rachel. I've never heard of a doctor named Franklin Webb. Silence on her end. Then, carefully, Mr. Davenport. This is the 4th refill in 4 months. Someone has been picking these up regularly. The 4th refill. 4 months. My blood went cold despite the warm Charleston morning. 4 months ago was exactly when my memory started failing. When the fog rolled in and never quite left. When my own body began to feel like a stranger's house I was stumbling through. I thanked Rachel. Told her to hold the prescription. Do not fill it. Then I sat motionless in my chair for a long time, listening to the old house creak around me while a terrible understanding took shape in my mind. Someone was drugging me. Someone in this house, someone with access to my daily routine, was feeding me sedatives, and had been doing so for months. I thought about who lived here. My daughter Cassie, 27, still grieving her mother, planning her wedding to Derek Shaw, and Nathan Davenport, my adopted son, 34 years old. The boy I had taken in at 14, raised alongside Cassie, given my name and my love and my trust, without reservation. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady but my mind suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. The house was quiet. Nathan had left early for what he called a business meeting. Cassie was at her bridal fitting. I was alone. The kitchen smelled of coffee. It always did. Nathan made my coffee every morning. Had for years. Said it was the least he could do for the man who gave him everything. I opened the cabinet above the coffee maker. Filters, sugar, creamer, normal. Then I reached behind the container of ground Colombian beans, into the dark space where no one would think to look. My fingers touched glass. Small, smooth, cold. I pulled it out. A brown prescription bottle. The label read, lorazepam, 2 milligrams. Prescribed to William Davenport, by Dr. Franklin Webb. 30 tablets. Dispensed 3 weeks ago. The bottle was half empty. My hands began to shake. Not from the drug this time. From rage. From heartbreak. From the sickening realization that the son I loved had been poisoning me in my own kitchen. In my own coffee. every single morning while smiling at me across the breakfast table. I wanted to smash the bottle against the wall. I wanted to scream until the old plaster cracked. But 25 years of surgical training taught me one thing above all else. When the patient is bleeding out, you do not panic. You do not scream. You locate the wound, you assess the damage, and you fix it with steady hands. I photographed the bottle from every angle. I placed it back exactly where I had found it, positioning it precisely against the cabinet wall, memorizing the angle so I would know if anyone moved it. Then I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, forcing my breathing to slow while my world rebuilt itself around a new and horrifying foundation. Nathan was drugging me. My son was poisoning me. The question was no longer whether something was wrong. The question was why. The front door opened. Footsteps in the hallway. That familiar, confident stride I had heard 1,000 times coming home from school, from work, from whatever lies he told to explain his absences. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway. Tall, handsome, impeccably dressed. He smiled at me with perfect warmth. The same smile I had seen at Christmas dinners, birthday celebrations, at Maggie's funeral when he held me and told me everything would be all right. "Dad, what are you doing up so early? You should be resting." His eyes swept the kitchen quickly, almost imperceptibly. Checking. "Let me make you some coffee." I looked at my son, at the stranger wearing my son's face, and I smiled back. "That sounds wonderful, Nathan." "Thank you." He moved to the coffee maker, reaching for the Colombian beans. His back was turned. He could not see my hands trembling beneath the table. Could not see the fury I held behind my eyes like a surgeon holds a scalpel, precise and ready. I watched him make my coffee. Watched his hand drift, just slightly, toward the cabinet where the pills were hidden. And I made a decision that would take 4 weeks to execute and would end with federal agents, 350 witnesses, and the complete destruction of everything Nathan Davenport had built on lies. But first, I had to survive. I drank the coffee that morning, poured it down the bathroom sink the moment Nathan left the kitchen. But I made sure he saw me raise the mug, take that first sip, and nod with appreciation. The performance had begun. For 3 days, I followed the same routine. Nathan made coffee. I thanked him, carried the mug upstairs, and emptied it into the sink behind a locked door. Each morning I flushed the toilet immediately after to mask the sound of liquid hitting porcelain. Each morning Nathan smiled at me over breakfast, asked about my sleep, mentioned how much better I seemed on Dr. Webb's new medication regimen. Dr. Webb. The name burned in my mind like an open wound. A doctor I had never met was prescribing sedatives under my name, and Nathan spoke about him with comfortable familiarity, as though this arrangement was perfectly normal, as though slowly erasing your father's mind was just another item on a to-do list. By the 3rd day without lorazepam, the fog began to lift. It did not vanish all at once. It retreated in stages, like tidewater pulling back from sand, revealing what had been submerged. My thoughts sharpened. My hands steadied. Colors seemed brighter. The harbor outside my window returned to its full vivid blue, instead of the muted gray I had accepted as my new reality. I began to notice things I had missed during 4 months of chemical haze. Nathan's late nights, always explained away as business dinners or networking events. The way he handled my mail, sorting it before I could see the envelopes. Always cheerful, always helpful. The subtle steering of conversations away from finances, from the family trust, from anything that required clear thinking. On the 4th day, I drove myself to the Medical University of South Carolina campus, not to my former colleagues in cardiothoracic surgery. Instead, I found Dr. Amelia Chen in the toxicology department, a woman I had mentored 15 years ago when she was a nervous medical student. Now she ran one of the most respected labs in the Southeast. I sat in her office and told her what I suspected. She listened without interruption, her face growing more serious with each sentence. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Will, I need blood and urine samples. Duration. She drew the blood herself. No lab technicians, no paperwork trail that could alert anyone. 48 hours, she promised. Results would come directly to a secure email address she created for me on the spot. Will, she said as I stood to leave. Her eyes were fierce, with barely contained anger. If what you're telling me is true, this is criminal poisoning. Not malpractice. Not a misunderstanding. Someone is deliberately incapacitating you. I know exactly what it is, Amelia. My voice was steady, despite the earthquake beneath my ribs. And I know exactly who. The results arrived 2 days later. Amelia's email was clinical, precise, devastating. Chronic benzodiazepine exposure, consistent with daily oral administration over approximately 16 to 20 weeks. Dosage pattern suggested gradual escalation, starting low enough to avoid immediate detection, building incrementally to create dependence and pronounced cognitive impairment. She had included a note at the bottom. Will, this concentration level would absolutely produce symptoms mimicking early-onset dementia, memory loss, confusion, motor impairment, personality changes. Any physician examining you during this period would reasonably diagnose neurodegenerative disease. That appears to be the intent. Please contact law enforcement immediately. I did not contact law enforcement. Not yet. I needed to understand the full scope of what Nathan had built around me. Before I tore it down, a surgeon does not open the chest until imaging reveals exactly where the disease has spread. That Friday afternoon I followed Nathan. He did not know I owned a second car, a modest gray sedan I kept in a rental garage on Calhoun Street. Maggie and I had used it for anonymous weekend drives to Folly Beach, away from the obligations of being the Davenports of Battery Row. Now, it served a different purpose. Nathan drove to a medical office building on the north side of Charleston. 3rd floor, Suite 312. The nameplate beside the door read Dr. Franklin Webb, psychiatrist. I parked across the street and waited, through binoculars, because a surgeon's hands remain steady even when his world is collapsing. I watched my son exit the building 40 minutes later. He paused at the entrance, shaking hands with a man in a white coat, mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, the practiced smile of someone who had learned to sell reassurance. Then I saw it. Nathan reached into his jacket and produced a thick manila envelope. The exchange was quick, but unmistakable. Dr. Webb took the envelope, glanced inside, and his smile widened. He clapped Nathan's shoulder like an old friend receiving a gift. Cash. Thousands of dollars. Judging by the thickness, my son was paying a psychiatrist I had never met, a man who had been prescribing drugs to incapacitate me, with money that almost certainly came from my own accounts. I lowered the binoculars. My hands were perfectly still. The rage had moved beyond trembling now, beyond the initial shock of discovery. It had crystallized into something harder, something colder, the same focused calm I had summoned during the most dangerous surgeries of my career. The kind of calm that precedes decisive, irreversible action. Nathan pulled out of the parking lot, driving home to make my evening coffee, to smile at me across the dinner table, to ask about my day with manufactured concern. He had no idea that the fog was gone, that behind my eyes a plan was already forming. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered to the empty car, to Maggie, to whatever part of her still watched over this broken family. 20 years I raised him. 20 years of lies. Then I started the engine and drove toward the one man in Charleston I trusted with my life. Judge Raymond Cross owed me his life. 15 years ago, his aortic valve had ruptured during a charity gala, and I had opened his chest on a hospital table with 3 minutes to spare before irreversible brain damage. He had flatlined twice. I had brought him back both times. When he woke 3 days later, his first words were, "Whatever you need, Will. For the rest of my life. Whatever you need." I had never collected on that debt. Never imagined I would. But as I pulled into the parking garage of the J. Waddy's Waring Federal Courthouse on Meeting Street, I knew the time had come. Raymond's chambers occupied the fourth floor. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The quiet authority of a man who had served on the federal bench for 22 years. He looked up from his desk when his clerk showed me in, and his smile faded the moment he saw my face. "Will." He stood immediately, reading something in my expression that made him wave the clerk out and close the heavy oak door himself. "Sit down. Tell me." I sat across from him and laid it all out. The pharmacist's call. The lorazepam hidden in my kitchen. 4 months of manufactured dementia. The coffee I had been pouring down the sink. Dr. Amelia Chen's toxicology report. The thick envelope of cash passed from Nathan's hand to Dr. Franklin Webb in a parking lot. Raymond listened without moving. His face, weathered by decades of hearing humanity's worst confessions, remained still. Only his eyes changed, growing harder with each detail. The way they did when sentencing someone who had shown no remorse. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. His fingers pressed together beneath his chin, the same posture I had seen in photographs from high-profile sentencing hearings. "How long has Nathan been your son?" he finally asked. 20 years. We adopted him when he was 14. He was an orphan. State ward, no family. Maggie found him through a church foster program. My voice caught on my wife's name. She fell in love with him immediately. Said he needed us. Raymond nodded slowly. "And now you need to know who he really is." "I need to know everything, Raymond. Everything he's hidden." The judge picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first to a contact at the South Carolina Department of Social Services, the second to a colleague at the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Records Division. His voice carried the weight of authority that opened doors no civilian could approach. "This will take 24 hours, he said, hanging up. "I'm pulling his complete adoption file, original birth records, any sealed juvenile records, and running his fingerprints through federal databases. If Nathan Davenport is not who he claims to be, we'll know by tomorrow morning." I leaned forward. "Raymond, what do I do until then? I'm living with someone who's poisoning me. Someone who smiles at me every morning, while destroying my mind." Raymond's expression turned grave. "You continue exactly as you have been. You pour the coffee away. You act foggy, confused, compliant. Give him no reason to suspect you've woken up. And Will." He fixed me with a stare that had terrified defendants for 2 decades. "Do not confront him. If he's been doing this for 4 months with this level of sophistication, confrontation will only make him dangerous." I nodded. I already knew this. A cornered predator is the most lethal kind. 26 hours later, Raymond called me on a number I did not recognize. "Secure line," he said by way of greeting. "Come to my office. Now. And Will, prepare yourself." I drove downtown in the gray sedan, checking mirrors out of habit, making sure Nathan's black BMW was nowhere in sight. The courthouse was quiet in the late afternoon, most staff gone for the day. Raymond met me at the elevator personally, his face etched with something between anger and sorrow. In his chambers, a thin file folder sat on his desk. Beige. Government issued. Stamped with classifications I recognized from my years, consulting with military hospitals. He gestured for me to sit, but remained standing himself, pacing slowly behind his desk. The adoption records were falsified, Will. Professionally. The orphanage documentation, the foster care history, the church program referral, all fabricated. Expensive forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. My chest constricted, but I forced myself to remain still. Who created them? We're still determining that. But here's what we do know. He stopped pacing and faced me directly. Nathan Davenport does not exist. That identity was constructed approximately 21 years ago. 1 year before he entered your family. Then who is he? Raymond placed both hands on the desk and leaned forward, his voice dropping lower as though the walls themselves might betray this secret. His birth name is Nathan Hale. Born June 14, 1991, at Charleston Memorial Hospital. Mother, Elena Hale. Father, unknown. He paused. Elena Hale, Will. The name hit me like a defibrillator shock. The room tilted. My vision narrowed to a single point of white-hot memory that I had buried so deep I thought it could never surface again. Elena Hale. 30 years ago. Operating Room 4. At MUS. Emergency cardiac surgery. A 38-year-old woman with a rare congenital defect that had gone undetected until her heart began failing. I was the attending surgeon. I was supposed to save her. I did not save her. Complications arose 17 minutes into the procedure. A vessel variant no imaging had predicted. Hemorrhaging. I could not control despite every technique in my arsenal. She coded on my table. I worked for 41 minutes trying to bring her back. 41 minutes of chest compressions and adrenaline and bargaining with God. It was not enough. Nothing was enough. Elena Hale died at 9:17 on a Tuesday evening. And when I walked into that waiting room to deliver the news, a small boy was sitting in a plastic chair. His legs too short to reach the floor, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. He looked up at me with enormous brown eyes. "Is my mommy coming home?" I knelt in front of that child and told him the worst truth a 4-year-old can hear. And then social services came. And the boy disappeared into the system. And I carried the weight of that night. For 3 decades. Raymond watched me carefully. "Will? Are you all right?" I was not all right. I was staring at a file that told me the boy in the plastic chair had spent 10 years in foster homes, changed his name, created a false identity, and at 14 years old had deliberately positioned himself to be adopted by the surgeon who had failed to save his mother. 20 years of patience. 20 years of pretending to love me. 20 years of waiting. "He's been planning this since he was 14 years old," I whispered. "Maybe longer." Raymond nodded. "It appears so. The level of premeditation is extraordinary." I looked at the file. At the name Nathan Hale printed in cold government type. The boy with the stuffed rabbit. The teenager who had called me dad for the first time, with tears in his eyes. The man who made my coffee every morning with poison hidden in his smile. "Will," Raymond said gently, "what do you want to do?" I met his eyes. The fog was gone completely now, replaced by something sharper and more dangerous than any scalpel I had ever held. "I want to know everything he's done. Every crime. Every lie. Every person he's hurt. And then, I want to destroy him so completely that he can never hurt my daughter or anyone else again." I drove home from Raymond's office in a state I can only describe as fractured consciousness. Half of me navigated Charleston's narrow streets on autopilot, stopping at red lights, signaling turns. The other half was 30 years in the past, standing in Operating Room 4 with blood on my gloves and a flatline screaming in my ears. Elena Hale. I had never forgotten her name. In 25 years of cardiac surgery, I had lost 11 patients on the table, 11 names carved into a part of my soul that no amount of time could smooth over. But Elena was different. Elena was the one who haunted me. She had been 38 years old. Dark hair, kind eyes, a nervous laugh when I explained the procedure during our pre-op consultation. A single mother raising a young son. She worked 2 jobs, which was why the congenital defect in her mitral valve had gone undetected for so long. No insurance. No regular checkups. By the time she collapsed at work and was rushed to my operating room, the damage was extensive. I told her the risks. I was honest, as I always was. 80% survival rate under normal circumstances. But her case was not normal. The valve had deteriorated beyond what imaging suggested, and there was possible involvement of surrounding structures that we would only confirm once I opened her chest. She signed the consent forms with a hand that trembled slightly. Then she looked at me and asked the question that would echo through 3 decades of my life. "Dr. Davenport, my boy is only 4. He has nobody else. Please bring me back to him. I promised I would do everything in my power. It was the truth. It was also not enough. 17 minutes into the procedure, I discovered what no scan had revealed. An anomalous coronary artery wrapped around the diseased valve, hidden behind calcified tissue. When I attempted the repair, the vessel tore. Blood filled the surgical field faster than suction could clear it. I called for additional units, clamped what I could reach, worked with both hands, moving independently the way only decades of training allows. But anatomy is merciless. The variant was positioned in a way that made repair nearly impossible without sacrificing the artery entirely. And sacrificing it meant guaranteed cardiac arrest. I chose the lesser gamble. I attempted a bypass graft under emergency conditions, something I had done successfully 4 times before. The 5th time, it failed. Elena's heart stopped at 9:03. I performed manual cardiac massage for 14 minutes, while my team pushed every drug protocol available. At 9:17, after 41 minutes of total effort, I called time of death. I remember washing my hands afterward. The water running pink, then clear. I remember the walk to the waiting room taking what felt like hours. I remember the fluorescent lights humming overhead like mechanical mourners. And I remember the boy. He sat in a blue plastic chair, legs dangling above the floor, both arms wrapped around a stuffed rabbit with one ear torn halfway off and reattached with clumsy stitches. A child's repair. Someone who loved that rabbit had tried to fix it with the limited tools available to a 4-year-old. He looked up when I entered. Those brown eyes. Enormous. Trusting. Waiting. Is my mommy coming home? I knelt on the cold linoleum and told him the truth as gently as I knew how. His face did not crumble immediately. It went blank first. Perfectly still, the way a lake goes still before a storm breaks its surface. Then his lower lip trembled, and the rabbit fell from his arms, and he made a sound that I have heard in my sleep for 30 years, not crying exactly. Something roar, the sound of a world ending for someone too young to understand what worlds are. Social services arrived within the hour. A woman in a gray cardigan took his hand and led him down the corridor. He looked back at me once over his shoulder, and in that look was something I could not name then, but recognize now with terrible clarity. He was memorizing my face. I parked in the garage behind the Battery Row house and sat in the darkness of the car for 20 minutes, letting the past and present merge into a single devastating picture. Nathan, 14 years old, standing on our doorstep with a caseworker and a small duffel bag. Maggie beside me, already in love with this quiet, polite teenager who spoke softly and made eye contact and said, "Thank you for giving me a chance, sir." He had planned it. Even at 14, he had planned it. He had tracked me down, discovered my family, my wife's involvement with the church foster program, and positioned himself precisely where Maggie would find him. Find him and fall in love with him. Find him and bring him home to the man who had let his mother die. I thought about the first time he called me Dad. 6 months after the adoption, we were in the backyard, and I was teaching him to throw a football. The ball wobbled through the afternoon light, and he laughed, genuinely laughed, and said, "Nice throw, Dad." Maggie cried happy tears on the porch. Was any of it real? Was there ever a single moment in 20 years where Nathan felt something genuine toward me? Toward Maggie, who loved him without condition or reservation? Toward Cassie, who worshipped her older brother? Or was every smile, every holiday, every embraced and whispered, "I love you, Dad," nothing more than a predator's patience? A long game played by a damaged child who grew into something far more dangerous than the foster system could have predicted? I thought about guilt. My guilt. Elena Hale died because a vessel hid behind calcified tissue, because anatomy lied. I had reviewed that case 100 times with colleagues, with ethics boards, with my own conscience at 3 in the morning. The consensus was always the same. Unforeseeable complication. No negligence. No error in judgment. Sometimes patients die, despite our best efforts. But knowing you were blameless does not erase the weight of a child asking if his mommy is coming home. It does not silence the sound he made when I told him no. Did Nathan's grief justify 20 years of deception? Did his mother's death entitle him to poison me, steal my fortune, and destroy my daughter's life? No. Nothing justified that. Grief may explain the origin of a monster, but it does not excuse the monster's teeth. I stepped out of the car. The evening air carried salt and magnolia, the eternal perfume of Charleston in spring. Inside the house, lights glowed warm in the kitchen window. Nathan was probably making dinner, probably humming as he chopped vegetables, perfectly at ease in the home of the man he was systematically destroying. I straightened my shoulders, checked my reflection in the car window, practiced the vacant, slightly confused expression that Nathan expected to see. Then I walked inside to have dinner with the son who had waited 20 years to ruin me. "There you are, Dad." Nathan looked up from the stove with that perfect smile. "I made your favorite. Shrimp and grits." "Wonderful," I said, settling into my chair at the kitchen table, the same chair I had sat in for 30 years. The same table where Maggie served Thanksgiving dinners. The same room where a murderer served me dinner with my dead patient's eyes. "How was your day?" he asked. "Quiet," I replied. "Foggy." His smile widened slightly. Satisfied. I ate his shrimp and grits and planned his destruction with every bite. 3 days after learning my son's true identity, Judge Raymond Cross called me on the secure line at 6 in the morning. His voice carried an urgency I had not heard before. "Will, I need you to meet someone. Today. Not at my office. Somewhere public, but discreet. Do you know Fort Sumter?" I knew Fort Sumter. Every Charlestonian did. The old Civil War fortress sitting in the harbor, accessible only by ferry, surrounded by open water that made surveillance nearly impossible. A place where secrets could be exchanged without walls listening. Who am I meeting? Her name is Diane Torres. Special Agent, Drug Enforcement Administration. She's been running an investigation that intersects with your situation in ways neither of us expected. He paused. "Will, it's worse than we thought. Much worse." The ferry to Fort Sumter departed from Liberty Square at 10:15. I boarded among a group of tourists, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses that made me look like any other retiree visiting historical landmarks on a spring morning. The harbor wind cut across the deck, carrying salt spray and the distant sound of ship horns. Agent Diane Torres was waiting at the fort's upper battery, leaning against a cannon with the casual posture of someone who blended into any environment by choice. Early 40s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back sharply. Her eyes swept me with the assessment of someone trained to read people the way I had been trained to read cardiac rhythms. Fast, accurate, missing nothing. "Dr. Davenport." She did not extend her hand. Judge Cross briefed me. "Let's walk." We moved along the fort's perimeter wall, 2 figures silhouetted against the harbor sky. Below us, waves slapped against ancient brick. Tourists wandered the lower levels, too far away to overhear. Torres spoke without preamble. 6 months ago, my team identified a significant opioid distribution network operating through residential properties in the Charleston Historic District. High-end homes being used as midpoint storage for product moving from port to inland distribution. One of those properties is your home on Battery Row. The words landed like hammer blows. My house. The house where Davenports had lived for 200 years. The house where I had raised my children. Where Maggie had tended her garden. Where generations of family history lived in every crack and floorboard. Nathan had turned it into a drug warehouse. "How long?" I managed. 6 months that we can confirm. Possibly longer. The product moves through at night. Small quantities, high value. Pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl and oxycodone. Street value approximately $200,000 per shipment. Shipments occurring twice monthly. I gripped the cannon beside me, the iron cold beneath my fingers. Nathan. Torres nodded. Nathan Hale, yes. We identified him as the property contact 3 months ago, but we've been building the case slowly. We wanted the entire network, not just one node. She turned to face me directly. That changed when Judge Cross contacted us about your situation. Now we have intersecting federal cases: poisoning, financial fraud, drug trafficking. Your son is looking at decades, Dr. Davenport. There's more you need to know, she continued, pulling a tablet from her jacket. She swiped to a Federal Bureau of Prisons record. A mugshot filled the screen. Nathan's face, slightly younger, slightly thinner, staring at the camera with flat, dead eyes. Nathan Hale served 26 months in the Federal Correctional Institution in Edgefield, South Carolina. Fraud and identity theft charges. Sentenced 4 years ago. Released 2 years ago. 4 years ago. I searched my memory. 4 years ago, Nathan had announced he was accepted into a prestigious business program in London. An 18-month course, he said. An opportunity too good to pass up. I had been so proud. Maggie had thrown him a farewell dinner. We wired him living expenses every month for nearly 2 years. Rent, food, tuition. Thousands of dollars sent to support his education. He had been in a prison cell an hour and a half from our house. We sent him money, I said, my voice hollow. For London. For his studies. Torres's expression remained neutral, professional, but something flickered behind her eyes. That money funded his operation setup. It went into accounts that later purchased the first opioid shipments. I had financed my own son's drug empire while believing I was investing in his future. The irony was so grotesque it nearly made me laugh. Nearly. The man my daughter is engaged to, I said. Derek Shaw. What do you know about him? Torres swiped to another file. Another mugshot. Harder face. Scarred jawline. Prison tattoo barely visible above the collar line. Real name, Marcus Vance. 33 years old. Met Nathan at Edgefield. Served 4 years for aggravated assault and armed robbery. Released 8 months before Nathan introduced him to your daughter as Derek Shaw, financial consultant. My daughter was engaged to a violent felon. A man Nathan had found in prison and deployed like a weapon aimed at my family. Cassie, who still slept with a nightlight because darkness frightened her. Who cried at sad commercials. Who believed in people with the same open heart her mother had possessed. She was sharing her bed with a man convicted of putting someone in a hospital. He's playing a role, Torres confirmed. Shaw, or Vance, has no financial background whatsoever. No degree. No certification. He's an actor in Nathan's production. We believe the wedding is the trigger event for some kind of financial maneuver. We're still working to identify exactly what. I can tell you exactly what. I laid out what I knew. The trust fund. The inheritance clause, triggered by Cassie's marriage. The power of attorney Nathan was engineering. Dr. Webb's fraudulent competency evaluation designed to declare me unfit. Torres listened, recording everything on her tablet, her jaw tightening with each new detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, staring out across the harbor toward the Charleston skyline. Dr. Davenport, we have an opportunity here. A rare one. Multiple federal agencies, multiple charges, all converging on one event. Your daughter's wedding. She turned to face me, and in her eyes, I saw the cold calculation of someone who had spent years dismantling criminal networks one piece at a time. We can take Nathan down at the wedding. Everyone will be there. Nathan, Vance, likely other network contacts. We arrest them all simultaneously. Maximum impact, minimum chance of flight. DEA, FBI, US Marshals coordinating together. The wind picked up across the fort's walls, carrying the sound of tourists laughing somewhere below. Seagulls circled overhead, white against gray sky. In the distance, Charleston's church spires rose above the harbor like silent witnesses. "My daughter," I said. "Cassie is involved. Unknowingly, I believe. But she signed documents. She's part of this, whether she chose to be or not." Torres met my eyes steadily. "If she cooperates, if she testifies against Nathan and Vance, we can protect her. Reduce charges, possibly none at all depending on what she knew and when, but she has to cooperate fully." I looked out at the harbor, at the water that had carried ships in and out of Charleston for 300 years, at the city, where my family had lived and worked and loved for generations. Nathan had poisoned all of it, turned our legacy into a cover for his revenge. "I'll do whatever it takes to save my daughter, Agent Torres." "Whatever it takes." Torres nodded once, crisp and final. "Then we plan. The wedding is in 3.5 weeks. That gives us time to build an airtight case. I'll coordinate with Judge Cross and the US Attorney's Office. You continue playing the confused father. Can you do that?" I thought of 25 years of remaining calm while hearts stopped on my table, of making life and death decisions with steady hands while chaos erupted around me. "I can do that." Agent Torres introduced me to the numbers 4 days later. Not in person. The DEA's forensic accountant worked from a secure facility in Colombia, and the evidence was too sensitive to transport. Instead, Torres arranged a video conference through an encrypted system I accessed from Raymond's chambers. The only location we deemed completely safe. The accountant's name was Gerald Hoffman. Balding, precise. The kind of man who found poetry in spreadsheets and music in financial patterns. He shared his screen without pleasantries, launching directly into a presentation that would strip away my last remaining illusions about the boy I had raised. "Dr. Davenport, over the past 18 months, approximately $1.8 million has been systematically removed from your personal accounts, your investment portfolio, and the Davenport Family Trust." He paused to let the number settle. "The methodology is sophisticated. Multiple extraction channels designed to stay below reporting thresholds and avoid triggering automated fraud alerts. 1.8 million. The number sat in my chest like a stone. I had worked 40 years to build that wealth. 40 years of early mornings and late surgeries and careful investments. Maggie and I had planned it for Cassie's future, for grandchildren we hoped to spoil, for a retirement filled with travel and garden parties and quiet evenings on the porch watching the harbor change colors. Nathan had taken nearly half of it while I smiled at him across the breakfast table. Hoffman continued, clicking through color-coded diagrams that mapped the flow of money like blood moving through arteries. He established 3 shell companies: Davenport Strategic Partners, Low Country Investment Group, and Harbor Consulting Associates, all registered in Delaware, which requires minimal disclosure. Monthly invoices were submitted to your business manager for consulting services, investment management fees, and strategic planning. All fictional. "My business manager approved these?" I asked. "Your business manager is Nathan Hale." Hoffman's voice was flat. "He assumed that role 14 months ago, citing your declining cognitive function. Your previous manager retired. And Nathan convinced your financial advisor that the transition was your decision." Of course. The sedatives had served double purpose. They made me confused enough to lose track of financial details, and they created a documented pattern of cognitive decline that justified Nathan taking control. Every piece of his plan interlocked with mechanical precision. Hoffman pulled up another document. "Now, here's where the wedding becomes critical. The Davenport Family Trust, established by your wife, Margaret Davenport, contains a triggering clause. Upon the marriage of the sole beneficiary, Cassandra Davenport, the trust converts from restricted to accessible status. Current value, $4.2 million. $4.2 million. Plus the 1.8 already stolen. Nathan was targeting over 6 million total. However, Hoffman continued, access requires authorization from the trust's designated guardian. Originally, that was you, Dr. Davenport. But 8 months ago, guardianship documents were filed with the probate court transferring control to Nathan Davenport, citing your medical incapacitation and Dr. Franklin Webb's psychiatric evaluation. I closed my eyes. 8 months ago, while I was stumbling through fog, unable to remember what day it was, Nathan had been filing legal documents that stripped me of control over my own family's wealth. And Dr. Webb's fraudulent diagnosis was the key that unlocked the cage. The moment Cassandra marries Derek Shaw, Hoffman explained, the trust activates. Nathan, as designated guardian, gains full access. Based on his pattern, we estimate he'll liquidate within 72 hours and move everything offshore. Torres's voice came through the conference line. Which brings us to the exit strategy. Gerald, show him the travel documents. Hoffman clicked to a new screen. An airline booking confirmation filled the frame. One ticket. American Airlines. Flight 741. Charleston to Miami. Connecting to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure date: 3 days after the scheduled wedding. Passenger name: David Mercer. David Mercer is one of at least 4 false identities Nathan Hale maintains, Torres explained. We've confirmed passport, driver's license, and bank accounts under this name. The Costa Rica account currently holds $320,000, transferred in small increments over the past year. One ticket. I stared at the screen. One single ticket. To a country. With no extradition treaty. What about Cassie? I asked. Though I already knew the answer. Torres's silence confirmed it. Hoffman spoke instead. Clinical and precise. There is no second ticket. No booking under Cassandra Davenport or any known alias associated with your daughter. Additionally, there is no ticket for Megan Holt, whom we've identified as Nathan's romantic partner. No ticket for Cassie. No ticket for Megan. Nathan planned to trigger the trust through Cassie's fake marriage, liquidate $6 million, and vanish alone to Costa Rica. My daughter would wake up to federal agents at her door. Her name on forged documents, her signature on fraudulent transfers. She would face prosecution for crimes Nathan engineered while he sipped cocktails on a beach 1,200 miles away. And Megan, his own lover, the woman who believed she was his partner in this scheme, she would be left behind too. Discarded like every other tool once its purpose was served. He doesn't love anyone, I said quietly. The words came from somewhere deep and final. He's incapable of it. Cassie, Megan, even his mother. He's used her memory as justification. But this was never about Elena. This is about what he is. What he's always been. Torres spoke carefully. Dr. Davenport, people like Nathan don't form attachments. They form strategies. Every relationship is transactional. Your daughter wasn't his sister. She was his access point. You weren't his father. You were his target. The encrypted screen glowed blue in the dim chambers. Raymond sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, solid and grounding. I thought about Maggie, about how she had seen Nathan at 14 and seen a lost child who needed love. She had given him everything. Opened our home, our hearts, our family. And he had taken it all, converted love into currency, and planned to disappear without a backward glance. 3 weeks, I said. We have 3 weeks until the wedding, Torres confirmed. 3 weeks to lock down every piece of evidence, every financial record, every false identity, every co-conspirator. When we move at that wedding, there will be no escape route he hasn't already lost. I straightened in my chair. The stone in my chest had become something else now. Not grief, not rage, something quieter and far more dangerous. Purpose. Then let's make sure he walks into that ceremony believing he's already won. The knock came at 11:14 on a Wednesday night. Soft, hesitant. The kind of knock that asks permission before it even begins. I was in my study, reviewing encrypted files Torres had sent that afternoon, when the sound pulled me back to the present. I closed the laptop quickly, slid it beneath a stack of medical journals, and crossed to the door. Cassie stood in the hallway in flannel pajamas and bare feet, her hair pulled into a messy bun that made her look 16 again. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her nose pink from crying she had tried to hide. She clutched a tissue in one hand, twisting it into a tight spiral the way she had done since childhood whenever anxiety overwhelmed her. "Dad? Can we talk?" My chest constricted. The last time she had come to my door like this, she was 12 years old, and her best friend had moved away. Maggie had been alive then, and the three of us had sat on Cassie's bed eating ice cream until the sadness softened into sleep. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." She settled into the leather armchair across from my desk, pulling her knees up to her chest, making herself small. The desk lamp cast warm light across her face, catching the tracks of dried tears on her cheeks. She looked fragile in a way that frightened me, not the fragility of grief, which I recognized. Something else. Something closer to fear. "What's troubling you, Cassie?" She did not answer immediately. Her eyes moved around the room, landing on the framed photograph of Maggie on my bookshelf. The one from our anniversary trip to Savannah, Maggie laughing on a bench beneath Spanish moss, sunlight in her hair. "I keep dreaming about Mom," Cassie whispered. "She's trying to tell me something, but I can't hear her. She keeps reaching for me, and I can't reach back." I waited. In surgery, patience saves more lives than speed. You do not rush a diagnosis. You let the symptoms present themselves. "Dad, something doesn't feel right about this wedding." The words came faster now, tumbling out like water finding a crack in a dam. "About Derek. About everything Nathan has been planning. I can't explain it. It's just this feeling in my stomach. Like I'm walking towards something I can't see clearly, and everyone keeps telling me it's fine, but it doesn't feel fine." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Concerned father. Slightly confused. The mask I wore every day. "What do you mean, honey? What specifically doesn't feel right?" Cassie pulled the tissue tighter, her knuckles whitening. "Nathan asked me to sign some papers last month. Legal documents. He said they were standard pre-wedding financial arrangements, but I didn't really understand what they said. And when I asked questions, he got impatient. Said I was overthinking things. Said to trust him. There it was. The guardian transfer documents. The power of attorney forms. My daughter had signed away control of her own trust fund, and somewhere beneath Nathan's manipulation, some instinct had told her it was wrong. "What kind of papers, Cassie?" She shook her head, frustration crossing her features. "I don't know exactly. Something about the trust fund. Something about you." Her voice dropped. "About your health. Nathan said it was just precautionary. In case you..." She trailed off, unable to finish. "In case I was declared incompetent. In case Dr. Webb's fraudulent evaluation stripped me of legal authority. In case their father became a ward of the state, locked away in a facility while Nathan drained every penny from the family accounts." I leaned forward, careful to show concern without revealing the fire burning behind my ribs. "Cassie, if something feels wrong, you should listen to that feeling. Your mother always said intuition is the body's way of knowing what the mind hasn't caught up to yet." Tears spilled fresh down her face. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me, Dad? Of the choices I've made?" The question sliced through me with surgical precision. I wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her gently, tell her everything. Tell her that Nathan was a fraud, that Derek was a convicted criminal, that her wedding was a trap designed to steal her inheritance and send her father to a nursing home. I wanted to save her right now. In this room, with truth, but I thought of Torres's words. If Cassie learned the truth from me alone, without evidence, without the undeniable proof of public exposure, Nathan would find a way to spin it. He would tell her I was paranoid, that the dementia was making me delusional, that she should trust him. not the confused old man who had been forgetting his own name for months. So I swallowed the truth and gave her something I could. Your mother would be proud of who you are, Cassie. Not of any single choice, but of your heart. You have her heart. And that heart is telling you something right now. I think you should listen to it. She opened her mouth. I could see the words forming behind her eyes, the confession building pressure like blood behind a clot. She was going to tell me. She was going to say it all. Dad, I think Nathan might be. Footsteps in the hallway. Quick, confident. Nathan appeared in the doorway. His expression a perfect blend of concern and warmth. He wore sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair slightly mussed from bed. The picture of a brother worried about his sister. Cassie? Baby? What's wrong? I heard you get up. His eyes moved to me, scanning, evaluating, a microsecond of calculation that no one else would have noticed. Is everything okay, Dad? The transformation in Cassie was instantaneous and devastating. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. The vulnerability that had cracked her open moments ago sealed shut, like a wound cauterized. She stood, wiping her eyes with quick, embarrassed motions. Nothing. Just wedding jitters. Dad was helping me calm down. Nathan crossed the room and placed his hand on her shoulder. Possessive. Controlling. The gesture of someone reclaiming territory. Come back to bed, sweetheart. You need sleep. Big day tomorrow. We're meeting the caterer. Cassie glanced back at me. In that single look, lived everything she could not say. Desperation. Apology. Fear. The look of someone drowning, who can see the shore but cannot reach it. Then Nathan guided her through the door, his hand firm on her back. As they moved down the hallway, I heard his voice drop to a whisper. Low. Deliberate. Meant to control, not comfort. Remember what's at stake, Cassie. Don't get emotional now. We're too close. The words faded as they turned the corner toward their wing of the house. I sat motionless in my study, hands gripping the armrests of my chair until the leather creaked. She had been so close. One sentence away from choosing the truth. One breath away from breaking free. And Nathan had felt it. Sensed it the way a predator senses prey testing the fence, and he had come to push her back into the cage. I stood and walked to the bookshelf. Maggie's photograph smiled at me from Savannah, frozen in a moment when our family was whole. When our daughter was safe. When the boy we loved was not a monster wearing our name. I tried, Maggie. I whispered. I gave her the chance. She couldn't take it. The house settled around me. Old wood groaning in the night. 200 years of Davenport history, pressing down on walls that now sheltered predators and victims under the same roof. I made my decision. No more waiting for Cassie to save herself. I would save her whether she chose it or not. Even if she hated me for it. Even if it destroyed whatever fragile trust remained between us. A father's job is not to be loved. A father's job is to protect. Even when protection looks like destruction. The call came at 6:42 on a Thursday morning, 10 days before the wedding. Torres's voice was clipped, carrying the restrained satisfaction of a hunter whose trap had sprung. We picked up Marcus Vance last night, motel on Highway 17, north of Mount Pleasant. Packed bag, $3,000 in cash, bus ticket to Jacksonville. He was running. I set down my coffee. Running from Nathan? Cold feet. We got him before he reached the station. He's at our field office now. And Will. He's talking fast. You should come see this. 40 minutes later, I stood behind one-way glass in a DEA interrogation room on King Street. The room beyond was small, gray, deliberately uncomfortable. Metal table, 2 chairs, fluorescent lighting that turned skin, the color of old paper. Marcus Vance looked nothing like the Derek Shaw who had charmed my daughter over candlelit dinners. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a wrinkled undershirt. His practiced smile had dissolved into raw fear. Without the costume, without Nathan's script, He was simply a scared man facing consequences. Torres sat across from him, relaxed and conversational. Marcus, you're looking at federal conspiracy charges, drug trafficking, wire fraud, identity theft. You know federal sentencing from Edgefield. I don't need to spell it out. Vance's knee bounced rapidly. I want a deal. I'll tell you everything. Then start talking. The words poured out like confession from a man who could not hold the poison any longer. I leaned closer to the glass, reading his body language the way I once read cardiac monitors. Nathan recruited me at Edgefield. Cellmates for 9 months. He had this whole plan laid out like a business presentation. Needed someone charming, educated, convincing. $60,000 for about 10 months of work. What was the role? Boyfriend. Fiancé. Husband. To his sister Cassie. Vance ran his hands through his hair. He gave me a complete backstory. Derek Shaw, financial consultant, Georgetown graduate, coached me on everything. What to say, how to dress, what books to pretend I'd read. He even had me practice a softer accent. I thought of Cassie saying, he quoted Hemingway on our first date, Dad. Every word scripted. My daughter fell in love with a character in Nathan's screenplay. The wedding triggers a trust fund, Vance continued. Millions. Nathan controls it through some guardianship thing. We get married. Nathan moves the money. 6 months later we annul. I disappear. Cassie thinks it was a failed marriage. Torres leaned back. Then Vance's face changed. Agitation shifted to genuine terror. He has a plan B. Always has a plan B. Vance's voice dropped. Said he'd done this before, with other families. When I asked what happened to those other marks, he smiled and said he made problems disappear permanently. The words hung like smoke. Torres's pen paused 1 fraction of a second. Did he elaborate? Vance shook his head rapidly. No. I didn't ask. But the way he said it, the look in his eyes. He swallowed. Nathan doesn't bluff. Whatever he's done to people who got in his way, he meant every word. Torres offered the cooperation agreement. Full confession on video. Complete silence toward Nathan. Vance agreed immediately, nodding so hard his chair moved. The recording setup began within minutes. Then Torres stepped into the observation room and closed the door behind her. Her expression carried something new. Not professional detachment. Something grimmer. There's one more thing. Dr. Davenport. She opened her tablet. A photograph filled the screen. A woman in her early 60s, silver hair, elegant features. Below it, a police report header from Savannah, Georgia. Patricia Voss. 62. Wealthy widow. Died 14 months ago in what was ruled an accidental fall down her staircase. Torres swiped to financial records. 3 months before her death, she began a relationship with a man calling himself Daniel Reed. During that time, $470,000 was transferred from her accounts to shell companies. She swiped again. A surveillance camera photo. Grainy, but unmistakable. Nathan, entering an ATM vestibule. Different hair, glasses, but his face, his posture, his eyes. Daniel Reed withdrew $23,000 in cash the week before Patricia Voss died. He disappeared the day after her funeral. I stared at the photo. At Nathan, captured in a moment he believed no one would ever see. You think he killed her? Torres chose her words carefully. I think Patricia Voss discovered she was being robbed, confronted Daniel Reed, and subsequently fell down a flight of stairs. Whether she was pushed or fell during a confrontation, we intend to find out. I pressed my palm against the observation glass. Beyond it, Vance was adjusting his microphone, preparing to record the confession that would bury Nathan. My daughter sleeps under the same roof as a man who may have murdered someone. Torres placed her hand on my arm. 12 more days, Dr. Davenport. 12 days, and Nathan will be in federal custody. He will never touch your family again. 12 days. I watched Vance begin his video confession, his voice steady now, unburdened by released secrets. 12 days of smiling at a potential killer across the breakfast table. 12 days of knowing what Nathan had done to Patricia Voss and pretending I did not. I had survived 30 years of guilt over Elena Hale. 12 more days was nothing, but every night between now and that wedding, I would check the locks twice, and I would sleep with one ear listening for footsteps outside my door. 3 days before the wedding, I could not sleep. This was not unusual anymore. Since learning the truth about Nathan, sleep had become a negotiation rather than a surrender. My body demanded rest, while my mind refused to release its grip on the hundreds of details, timelines, and contingencies that occupied every waking thought. At 1:47 in the morning, I sat in my study, reviewing Torres's latest briefing documents on a tablet whose existence Nathan did not know about. The house was silent. That deep Charleston silence, broken only by the distant sound of harbor water against seawalls and the occasional creak of 200-year-old joists settling in the humidity. I glanced at the security monitor on my desk. After discovering the drugs, I had quietly upgraded the system, adding cameras in hallways and common areas, linking everything to an app on the hidden tablet. Nathan had no idea. He still believed the cameras were the old decorative models that Maggie had insisted upon years ago. The ones he had disabled months ago, thinking I would never notice. The hallway camera on the second floor showed movement. A figure emerging from Nathan's bedroom, moving with the careful, deliberate quiet of someone who did not want to be heard. Nathan, barefoot, wearing only shorts, crossing the hallway not toward the staircase, not toward the kitchen, toward the guest wing, toward Megan Holt's room. Megan, Cassie's maid of honor, her college roommate. The woman Cassie called her best friend, her sister by choice, the person she trusted more than anyone, except family. Megan had been staying at the house for the past week, helping with wedding preparations. Every morning she sat beside Cassie at breakfast, discussing flowers and music and seating charts with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely invested in her best friend's happiness. I watched the screen as Nathan reached Megan's door. He did not knock. He turned the handle and stepped inside, as though entering his own bedroom. The door closed behind him. My hands did not shake. They should have. Some part of me should have been surprised. Damn, please, daughter. Please don't, please don't a 40. Please don't already ever registered as merely another layer of cruelty in an already bottomless well. I switched to the hallway audio feed. When I had installed the new cameras, I had also upgraded the intercom system throughout the house. Each room now contained a small microphone, originally designed for whole house music distribution. Nathan did not know these could be monitored remotely, static at first. Then sounds I will not describe. Then voices, low and intimate, emerging from the speakers with terrible clarity. Megan's voice came first, lazy and satisfied. 3 more days, baby. I can barely stand pretending to care about her stupid centerpieces. Nathan laughed softly. 3 more days of playing the devoted brother. Then we're done with all of them. When do we leave? Megan's tone shifted, eager now. Hungry. Costa Rica. 3 days after the ceremony. Everything's arranged. New names. New passports. New life. I closed my eyes. Costa Rica. The single ticket Torres had found. But Nathan was telling Megan they were going together, which meant one of 2 things. Either he had purchased a second ticket under another alias that Torres had not yet discovered, or he was lying to Megan the same way he lied to everyone else. Given what I knew about Nathan, the answer was obvious. Megan's next question confirmed it. What about Cassie? She'll figure it out eventually. Nathan's response came without hesitation, without warmth, without a single shred of the brotherly love he performed so convincingly in daylight. What about her? I mean, she's my best friend. Was my best friend. A pause. Won't she come looking? Nathan's laugh was quiet and cold. The laugh of someone discussing chess pieces, not people. Cassie will be too busy explaining to the FBI why her name is on every document, every transfer, every forged signature. She signed everything I put in front of her, without reading a single page. When the feds come, and they will, eventually, she's the one holding the bag. And us? Gone. Untraceable. Living on a beach with $6 million and zero connections to the wreckage. His voice dropped lower, intimate, conspiratorial. That's what pawns are for, baby. You move them into position, you sacrifice them when needed, and you walk away with the queen, Cassie. His sister. The girl who had worshipped him since childhood. A pawn. Something to be sacrificed and discarded. And Megan. Lying beside him in the dark, believing herself to be the queen in his metaphor. Not knowing she was just another piece on his board. Another pawn who would discover too late that Nathan played only for himself. I thought of Cassie sleeping one floor above. Probably dreaming about her wedding. Probably imagining the beautiful life she believed waited for her on the other side of Saturday's ceremony. Her best friend was beneath her. Literally and figuratively. Betraying her with the man Cassie trusted most. I saved the audio recording. Time-stamped, archived, backed up to the encrypted cloud drive Torres had set up. Then I captured still frames from the video feed. Nathan entering Megan's room. The timestamp clear. The identification unmistakable. These would join the package for the wedding. The video confession from Marcus Vance. The financial records. The DEA evidence. The surveillance photographs. And now this. Proof that Nathan's lover was Cassie's best friend. Proof that every relationship in my daughter's life had been corrupted by the man she called brother. I turned off the monitor and sat in darkness. The old house breathed around me, its ancient walls holding secrets they had never been built to contain. My daughter deserves to see exactly who her best friend really is. I whispered to the empty room. She deserves to know that every person she trusted was a knife pointed at her back. Saturday could not come soon enough. The rehearsal dinner took place at Husk, a restaurant on Queen Street that Maggie had loved. She used to say the food tasted like Charleston itself. Rooted in history, but reaching towards something new. Nathan had chosen this venue. Whether he knew it was Maggie's favorite or whether the choice was coincidental cruelty, I could not determine. 60 guests filled the private dining room on the second floor. Exposed brick walls. Edison bulbs hanging from reclaimed wood beams. Long communal tables set with white linen and wildflower arrangements. Cassie had planned every detail with the earnest excitement of a woman who believed her life was about to begin. She did not know. Her groom had been arrested 9 days ago and was currently in federal custody. Nathan had handled Derek's absence with characteristic smoothness. A family emergency in Atlanta, he told Cassie. Derek's elderly aunt had fallen, needed surgery. He would absolutely be back for the wedding. Cassie had accepted this without question. Because Nathan said it. And Cassie still believed Nathan's words were truth. I arrived early, taking my seat at the head table beside the empty chair that would have been Maggie's. No one sat there. No one ever did at family gatherings. It remained as she had left it. A space held open for someone who would never fill it again. Guests arrived in waves. Family friends. Cousins from Virginia. Colleagues from my years at MUSC. People who had known the Davenports for decades, who had attended Maggie's funeral, who believed they were celebrating the next chapter of our family's story. Among them, invisible and precisely positioned, 3 US Marshals in civilian clothing monitored exits and documented attendees. Nathan worked the room like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes. Embraces. That warm laugh I had once believed was genuine. He moved from table to table, telling stories about Cassie's childhood, about family traditions, about how proud Maggie would have been. Every word, a performance. Every smile, a weapon. Megan sat beside Cassie at the bridal party table, their heads together, giggling over something on Megan's phone. Best friends, sisters by choice. The woman who was sleeping with Cassie's brother while helping plan the fake wedding that would destroy her life. I watched Megan squeeze Cassie's hand and felt something cold twist in my stomach. After the main course, Nathan stood and tapped his glass. The room quieted. 60 faces turned toward him, expectant, already smiling at whatever touching words the devoted brother was about to deliver. I want to say something about my father. Nathan's voice carried perfectly through the room, warm and resonant. He looked at me with an expression so convincingly loving that, for one disorienting moment, I almost believed it myself. 20 years ago, Will Davenport opened his home to a 14-year-old boy who had nothing. No family, no hope, no future. His voice cracked slightly, expertly. He didn't have to take me in. He didn't have to love me, but he did. He and Maggie gave me everything. A name, a family, a reason to believe that good people exist in this world. Murmurs of approval. Someone near the back dabbed at their eyes with a napkin. Nathan continued. His gaze locked on mine with manufactured intensity. Dad, you taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. About showing up every single day. Tomorrow, when Cassie walks down that aisle, it'll be because of the foundation you and Mom built. Everything good in this family started with you. He raised his glass. To Will Davenport. The best father anyone could ask for. 60 glasses rose. 60 voices echoed the toast. I lifted my own glass, my smile fixed and steady, while inside me something screamed so loudly I was certain the room could hear it. When the applause faded, I stood. My turn. Nathan's eyes followed me as I rose, and for the first time, I caught a flicker of something behind his composure. Not fear exactly. Alertness. The vigilance of an animal that senses a change in the wind. Thank you, Nathan. Those words mean more than you know. I paused, letting silence build. I've been thinking a lot about truth lately, about how families are built on it, how everything we are, everything we become, starts with being honest about who we are. I looked around the room, meeting eyes, holding gazes. Then back to Nathan. Tomorrow will be a day of revelation. A day when everyone in this room sees clearly. When truth speaks louder than any vow or promise. I raised my glass. To truth. To family. To seeing people exactly as they are. The room drank. Most smiled, interpreting my words as sentimental philosophy from an aging father. But Nathan did not smile. His glass rose a half-second late. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Something cold and calculating moved behind his expression. After dinner, guests lingered over dessert and bourbon. I excused myself to the restroom, but paused in the darkened hallway beyond the dining room. Nathan had stepped outside to the restaurant's small courtyard. Through the window, I watched him pull out his phone. I could not hear the words, but I recognized the body language. Tight shoulders, quick, sharp gestures. He was agitated, worried, speaking to someone he trusted with his unfiltered thoughts. My own phone buzzed silently in my pocket. Torres. A text message. Our team intercepted Nathan's call. He contacted Megan Holt. Transcript incoming. 30 seconds later, the transcript appeared on my screen. Nathan. Something's off about Dad. He was too sharp tonight. Too present. That speech about truth and revelation, that wasn't dementia talking. Megan. You think he knows something? Nathan. I don't know. Maybe the medication isn't working anymore. Or maybe I'm being paranoid. Megan. Should we move the timeline up? Nathan. No. Not yet. But if he does anything else strange before Saturday, we accelerate. Have your bag packed. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to the dining room wearing the vacant, slightly tired expression Nathan expected. I found him back at the table laughing with a cousin, his composure fully restored. Our eyes met across the room. He raised his bourbon glass to me with a warm smile. I smiled back. 2 days. 48 hours of performance remaining. He thought he was the predator. He had no idea he was already inside the cage. I woke at 5:11 on the morning of the wedding. Not from an alarm. From silence. The house held its breath around me. 200 years of walls waiting for what was about to happen within them. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling where early light was beginning to trace familiar cracks and shadows. This was the last morning I would wake in this house, as the man my family believed me to be. By tonight, Nathan would be in federal custody. Cassie would know the truth. And whatever remained of the Davenport family would have to decide whether it could survive. The encrypted phone glowed on my nightstand. One message from Torres, sent at 4:31. All units in position. 7 marshals deployed as guests and staff. Video equipment tested and loaded. Cayman accounts frozen at 4 a.m. Eastern. Derek's confession queued. Give the signal, and we move. Good luck, Will. I read it twice, then deleted it. My hands were perfectly still. The surgeon's calm had settled over me. The same focused clarity that had carried me through 1,000 operations where one tremor meant death. Today, I would perform the most important surgery of my life. Cutting out a cancer 20 years in the making, I showered in silence, dressed with deliberate precision. White shirt, pressed smooth. Silver cufflinks Maggie had given me for our 30th anniversary, the ones shaped like tiny anchors because she said I was hers. Charcoal suit, tailored for this day. Navy tie, knotted with the exactness of a man who understood that details mattered. On my dresser, Maggie smiled at me from a silver frame. Her garden party photograph, sun in her hair, laugh lines around her eyes, caught mid-sentence telling some story I could no longer remember. Today, Maggie. I touched the glass. I'll protect her today. I promise you. By 9 o'clock, the Beert Thur had transformed into something from a magazine. White magnolia arrangements climbed every column of the back veranda. A gardenia arch framed the altar, overlooking Charleston Harbor. 350 white chairs lined the garden in precise rows. Caterers assembled in the kitchen. A string quartet tuned instruments beneath a live oak draped in Spanish moss. Everything Cassie had dreamed. Everything she believed this day would be. Among the arriving guests, 7 US Marshals in civilian clothing took positions. A woman in a blue sundress stationed near the garden gate. A man in seersucker at the bar, his jacket cut to conceal a holster. Another beside the AV equipment ready to switch feeds at my signal. Torres herself stood near the harbor wall in an elegant green dress, indistinguishable from wealthy Charleston society. She caught my eye once across the garden and nodded. Imperceptible. Final. At 10:45, I knocked on the bridal suite door. Come in. Cassie stood before a full-length mirror in a gown that stopped my heart. Off-shoulder lace. Cathedral train. Not Maggie's dress, but the same timeless style her mother had loved. When she turned, I lost my breath. She looked exactly like her mother. The same eyes. The same hopeful smile. The same absolute faith that life would reward her for believing. Dad. Her chin trembled. Do I look okay? I crossed the room and took her hands. Cold. Trembling. You look like your mother on our wedding day. Which means you look perfect. Tears glistened but held. She was maintaining composure through sheer will, fighting against some instinct that told her this day would not end as planned. Dad. I need to tell you something. Barely a whisper. My pulse spiked. Not now. If she confessed before the ceremony, the plan collapsed. Nathan would not be at the altar. He would run. Tell me after, sweetheart. I squeezed her hands. Whatever it is can wait. Right now, be here. Be present. Be my daughter. End. Of Makey. Of Like's daughter. End. Of Likey. Of likey, and, of likey. She searched my face. You seem different today. Stronger. Clearer. Big days make people stronger. I pulled her into an embrace, holding her the way I had when she was small and the world frightened her. No matter what happens today. I whispered into her hair. I love you more than anything. That will never change. Remember that, Cassie. Promise me you'll remember. She pulled back, fear flickering. Dad, you're scaring me. Why does that sound like goodbye? The coordinator appeared. 5 minutes! Processional! In 5! I kissed her forehead. Not goodbye. A promise. We moved to the staging area. Pachelbel's cannon rose from the string quartet. 350 guests stood, turning. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the harbor, painting the scene in warmth that belied what was about to happen. At the altar, Nathan stood in his tuxedo. Beside him, the groom's position was empty. No Derek. Nathan's smile remained fixed, but I could see the tension in his jaw from 50 yards away. The rapid blinking, his eyes scanning the crowd for a man who was currently in a federal holding cell. He had told Cassie that Derek was stuck in traffic from the airport. Running late. Any minute now. The lies came so easily, even as his scheme disintegrated beneath his feet. I offered Cassie my arm. She gripped it tight. We began to walk. The aisle stretched ahead, lined with white roses and magnolia petals. Faces turned toward us, smiling, crying. They saw a proud father, a beautiful bride, a love story beginning. They did not see the federal agents among them. They did not see the AV technician ready to broadcast Derek's confession. They did not see the trap closing with every step. We reached the altar. Nathan stepped forward, panic barely contained. He leaned toward Cassie and whispered, Derek's almost here. Any second. The minister smiled warmly, opened his book, addressed the congregation. Who gives this woman to be married? Silence. 350 people holding breath. Cassie's hand trembling on my arm. Nathan's eyes locked on mine, willing me to say the words. To complete the transaction. To hand over my daughter and walk away. I released her arm. Stepped forward. Turned to face 350 witnesses, and spoke 2 words that shattered everything. I do not. I woke at 4:53, 7 minutes before the alarm I had set. The house was dark, silent. The last morning, I would wake in this bedroom as the man my family believed me to be. I reached for the encrypted phone on my nightstand. One message from Torres, sent at 4:31. All units in position. Marshals deployed. Video equipment tested. Derek's confession loaded. Accounts frozen, as of 4 a.m. Eastern. It's time, Will. Give the signal, and we end this. I read the message twice, then deleted it. My hands were perfectly still. The surgeon's calm had settled over me like a second skin. The same calm that had carried me through 1,000 operations where a single tremor meant death. Today was no different. Today I was cutting out a cancer that had grown inside my family for 20 years. I showered in silence, dressed with deliberate precision. White shirt, pressed smooth. Silver cufflinks Maggie had given me for our 30th anniversary. Charcoal suit, tailored 2 months ago for this occasion. Navy tie, knotted with the exactness of a man who understood that details mattered. Every piece of clothing felt like armor being assembled for battle. On my dresser, Maggie smiled at me from a silver frame. Her garden party photograph, sun in her hair, joy in her eyes. I touched the glass with my fingertips. Today, Maggie. I'll protect her today, I promise. By 8 o'clock, the Beerther had transformed. White magnolia arrangements climbed every column of the back veranda. An arch of gardenias framed the altar, overlooking Charleston Harbor. 350 white chairs lined the garden in perfect rows. Caterers moved through the kitchen. A string quartet tuned instruments on the east lawn. Everything Cassie had dreamed of, made real. Among the arriving guests, 7 US Marshals in civilian clothing took their positions. A woman in a blue sundress near the garden gate. A man in a seersucker suit at the bar. Another positioned beside the AV equipment that would broadcast the ceremony to overflow seating. Torres herself stood near the harbor wall, dressed elegantly in green, indistinguishable from any other guest. She caught my eye once and nodded. Imperceptible. Final. At 10:45, I knocked on the bridal suite door. Cassie's voice called out, bright and nervous. "Come in." She stood before a full-length mirror in Maggie's wedding dress. Not the same gown, but the same style. Off-shoulder lace, cathedral train, the kind of timeless elegance her mother had loved. When she turned to face me, my breath caught. She looked exactly like Maggie. The same eyes, the same hopeful smile, the same absolute faith that life would be beautiful if she just believed hard enough. "Dad." Her chin trembled. "Do I look okay?" I crossed the room and took her hands. Cold, shaking slightly. "You look like your mother. Which means, you look perfect." Tears glistened but did not fall. She was holding herself together with the desperate composure of someone who sensed, on some level she could not articulate, that this day would not end the way she imagined. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Her voice was barely a whisper. My heart hammered. Not now. Not when everything was in place. If she confessed now, before the ceremony, the plan would unravel. Nathan would not be at the altar. The public exposure would not happen. He would run. "Tell me after the ceremony, sweetheart." I squeezed her hands. "Whatever it is, it can wait. Right now, just be here. Be present. Be my daughter." She studied my face, searching for something. "You seem different today, Dad. Stronger. It's a big day. Big days make people stronger." I pulled her into an embrace, holding her the way I had held her as a child. Fierce and protective and complete. "No matter what happens today," I whispered into her hair, "I love you more than anything in this world. That will never change. Remember that." She pulled back, confusion and fear flickering across her features. "Dad, you're scaring me." "Why does that sound like a goodbye?" The wedding coordinator appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes, everyone. Processional in 5. I kissed Cassie's forehead. Not a goodbye. A promise. We moved to the staging area at the top of the garden path. The string quartet shifted from background music to Pachelbel's canon. 350 guests rose from their chairs, turning to watch. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the harbor behind the altar, painting everything in warmth and beauty. At the end of the aisle, Nathan stood in his tuxedo. Beside him, the space where Derek should have been was empty. Nathan's smile was fixed in place. But even from this distance I could see the tension in his jaw, the rapid blinking, the way his eyes swept the crowd, looking for the groom who would never arrive. He had told Cassie this morning that Derek was caught in traffic from the airport. Running late. Would be there any minute. The lies came so easily to him. Even now. Even as his entire scheme crumbled beneath his feet. I offered Cassie my arm. She took it, her grip tight. We began to walk. The aisle stretched before us, lined with white roses and magnolia petals. Faces turned toward us, smiling. Some already crying. They saw a proud father, a beautiful bride, the beginning of a love story. They did not see the 7 armed federal agents among them. They did not see the AV technician ready to switch the ceremony feed to Derek's video confession at my signal. They did not see the trap closing around Nathan with every step his sister took toward the altar. We reached the front. The minister smiled benevolently. Nathan stepped forward, his composure cracking at the edges. Where was Derek? Why was the groom's spot empty? He looked at me, and I saw panic, buried beneath the performance. Chris will be here any second, Nathan whispered to Cassie, then caught himself. The wrong name. A slip born from stress, referencing some other con, some other victim. He corrected instantly. Derek. Derek's on his way. The minister cleared his throat. Who gives this woman to be married? The garden fell silent. 350 people held their breath. Cassie's hand trembled on my arm. Nathan's eyes locked onto mine. Wide and desperate. Willing me to play my part, to say the words, to hand over my daughter like a transaction. I released Cassie's arm, turned to face the congregation, and spoke two words that shattered the silence like a stone through glass. I do not. Gasps rippled through the congregation like a wave. 350 faces shifted from joy to confusion. Cassie grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging through my jacket. Dad, what are you doing? Nathan recovered fast. He stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture, his voice projecting warmth and concern for the guests. Everyone, please. My father has been suffering from cognitive decline. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Dad, let's sit down. You're confused. I turned back to the altar and looked at Nathan with the steady gaze of a man who had spent 4 weeks dismantling lies. I'm not confused, Nathan. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly. Because I stopped drinking the coffee you've been poisoning with lorazepam since January. The color drained from his face. A microsecond of raw shock before the mask slid back into place. But 350 people saw it. That flicker of guilt no performance could disguise. I addressed the congregation again, my voice carrying across the silent garden. The man standing at this altar is not who any of you believe him to be. For the past 4 months, he has been drugging me with sedatives to manufacture symptoms of dementia. He paid a corrupt psychiatrist named Franklin Webb $80,000 to declare me mentally incompetent. He has stolen $1.8 million from my accounts through shell companies. And this wedding, I gestured at the flowers, the arch, the empty groom's position, is a fraud designed to activate my daughter's trust fund so he can steal $4.2 million more. Chaos erupted. Guests shouting, standing, phones appearing. Nathan lunged toward me. You're insane. This is paranoid delusion. Someone call an ambulance. I stepped back calmly and nodded to the AV technician. The ceremony projection screen flickered, and Marcus Vance's face appeared 10 feet tall behind the altar. His recorded voice filled the garden through the speaker system. Nathan Davenport paid me $60,000 to pretend to love Cassie. My real name is Marcus Vance. I met Nathan in federal prison. The wedding is fake. He's stealing everything from his family. Vance's confession played for 90 seconds. Enough. More than enough. The garden had gone silent again, 350 people staring at the screen with expressions ranging from horror to disbelief. Nathan's composure shattered completely. That man is lying. He's a criminal. You can't believe a convict over your own family. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket and swiped to the next piece of evidence. Then perhaps you can explain these. The screen changed. Surveillance photographs. Nathan and Megan Holt, in his bedroom, captured 3 nights ago. Nathan and Megan kissing. Nathan and Megan, in an embrace that left nothing to interpretation. Cassie made a sound I will carry with me until I die. Not a scream. Not a cry. A broken exhalation, as though every molecule of air had been punched from her lungs simultaneously. She turned slowly toward Megan, who stood frozen among the bridesmaids, her bouquet still clutched in white-knuckled hands. Meg? Cassie's voice was a whisper that somehow carried across the entire garden. My brother? You? And my brother? Megan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I swiped again. Text messages, enlarged on screen for everyone to read. Nathan's words in black and white. What about Cassie? That's what pawns are for, baby. You move them into position, sacrifice them when needed. and walk away with the queen. Cassie's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the white runner between the chairs, her wedding dress pooling around her like a fallen cloud. The bouquet scattered roses across the grass. Nathan made one last desperate attempt. He rushed toward me, finger pointing, voice raised to full volume. He's fabricating all of this. He's sick. He needs help. Someone stop this. I raised my hand. Not toward Nathan. Toward Torres. She stepped forward from her position by the harbor wall, credentials raised high. Nathan Hale, also known as Nathan Davenport, also known as Daniel Reed, also known as David Mercer. I am Special Agent Diane Torres, Drug Enforcement Administration. You are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and criminal poisoning. 6 marshals materialized from the crowd simultaneously. 2 flanked Nathan, hands on his shoulders before he could move. 2 more reached Megan Holt, whose face had gone the gray-white of old ash. The remaining 2 secured the garden exits. Handcuffs clicked around Nathan's wrists. The sound was small, metallic, final. It echoed across the silent garden like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Nathan stopped struggling. He went still in the marshal's grip, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. The charm was gone. The warmth, the practiced sun, the calculated performance of 20 years, all of it stripped away. What remained was cold, ancient. The voice of a 4-year-old boy who had grown into something monstrous. You want truth? He twisted in the marshal's hands to face the congregation. Here's truth. This man, your beloved Dr. Davenport, killed my mother 30 years ago. Elena Hale. She went into his operating room alive and came out in a body bag. He butchered her on his table, and then he adopted me like some kind of sick guilt offering. The garden went absolutely still. 350 faces turned from Nathan to me. I felt their eyes like physical weight. The judgment. The question. The sudden uncertainty about which man was the villain in this story. Nathan's voice rose to a scream. I'm Elena Hale's son! He murdered her, and then he raised me like a pet to make himself feel better about it. Everything I did was justice. Everything! Silence stretched across the garden. The harbor wind carried the faint sound of church bells from somewhere in the city. Magnolia petals drifted from the arch overhead, landing softly on the white runner where my daughter lay crumpled. I stepped forward, took the microphone from its stand. My hand was steady. My voice, when it came, was quiet, but carried to every corner of that garden. Elena Hale died 30 years ago from a rare surgical complication that no imaging could have predicted. I have carried the grief of that night for 3 decades. I have replayed that surgery 1,000 times, wondering if I could have done anything differently. The answer, confirmed by every medical review board that examined the case, is no. I looked directly at Nathan, at the boy with the stuffed rabbit, at the man in handcuffs. Your mother's death was a tragedy. My failure to save her is something I live with every day. But grief does not justify poisoning. Grief does not justify theft. Grief does not justify destroying your sister's life. And grief does not justify what you did to Patricia Voss in Savannah. Nathan's eyes widened at that name. The first genuine surprise I had seen on his face. You thought no one knew about her, I said softly. You were wrong. The marshals turned him toward the garden gate. As they led him away, Nathan twisted back one final time. His eyes found mine across the distance, and in them I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real. Bone-deep terror. The terror of a man who had finally lost control of his own story. Then he was gone. Through the gate. Into a waiting federal vehicle. Out of my life. The garden emptied slowly around us. Guests filed out in stunned clusters, whispering behind hands, some crying, others simply staring as though they had witnessed a car accident, and could not look away. The string quartet had stopped playing. The caterers stood frozen in the doorway to the kitchen. The magnolia petals continued to fall from the arch, indifferent to the devastation below. I knelt beside my daughter on the white runner. Her wedding dress spread around her like a collapsed parachute. All that careful lace and satin reduced to a puddle of ruined fabric on the grass. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Her hands pressed flat against the ground, as though the earth might give way if she let go. Cassie. I kept my voice low, gentle. The voice I had used when she woke from nightmares as a child. Cassie, look at me. She raised her head. Mascara tracked dark rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were raw, swollen, and in them, I saw something worse than grief. I saw the moment a person realizes that their entire reality has been constructed by someone else, that nothing they believed was real. You knew. Her voice was hoarse, scraped hollow. All this time, you knew what he was doing. You knew about Megan, about Derek, about everything. Yes. How long? 4 weeks. She flinched as though I had struck her. 4 weeks. You watched me plan this wedding for 4 weeks knowing it was fake. Knowing my brother was stealing from you. Knowing my best friend was sleeping with him. All. But. And you said nothing. I reached for her hand. She pulled away. I gave you chances, Cassie. 3 times you came close to telling me the truth. That night in my study, when you asked if Mom would be proud. The morning you said something didn't feel right. Last night in the bridal suite when you started to tell me something. I paused. Every time, Nathan pulled you back. Every time, you chose him over the truth. The words were cruel in their accuracy. I watched them land, watched her flinch again, watched the guilt flood her expression. I was scared. She whispered. He said, if I talked, I'd go to prison. He said I'd sign documents that made me responsible. He said what he needed to say to keep you compliant. I lowered myself fully to the ground beside her, sitting on the white runner in my charcoal suit, 2 Davenports in wedding clothes surrounded by scattered rose petals and the wreckage of 20 years of lies. Cassie, Nathan manipulated you. He isolated you from your friends after Mom died. He made you dependent on him. He convinced you that stealing from me was protecting the family. None of that was your idea. It was his. Torres approached from across the garden, her heels silent on the grass. She crouched beside us, her expression professional but not unkind. Miss Davenport, I'm Special Agent Torres, DEA. I need to speak with you about your involvement in Nathan Hale's activities. But first, there's something you should see. She held out her tablet. On the screen, an airline booking confirmation. 1 ticket. American Airlines, Charleston to Miami to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure date, 3 days from today. Passenger name, David Mercer. David Mercer is one of Nathan's false identities, Torres explained. This ticket was purchased 6 weeks ago. 1 ticket, 1 passenger. She let the implication settle. There is no second ticket for you. Miss Davenport, no booking under your name or any alias we've identified. Nathan planned to activate the trust fund through your marriage, transfer everything offshore, and flee the country alone. 3 days after your wedding, you would have woken up to federal agents at your door with every piece of evidence pointing at you. Cassie stared at the screen. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Finally, in a voice so small it barely qualified as speech, he was going to leave me. Yes, Torres confirmed. With nothing. With criminal charges. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Money laundering. 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Cassie's hands began to shake. Not the delicate tremor of sadness, but the violent, full-body shaking of someone whose nervous system has been overwhelmed by truth. She wrapped her arms around herself, the wedding dress crinkling and tearing slightly at the seams. And Megan? she asked. Torres swiped to another screen. Same situation. Nathan promised Megan Holt they would flee together. We intercepted messages confirming this, but the Costa Rica account and the ticket are solely in Nathan's name. Megan was also being abandoned. A bitter sound escaped Cassie's lips. Not quite a laugh. She thought she was special. She thought he loved her. Cassie looked up at me. I thought he loved me too. I thought he was my brother. I held her gaze. He's no one's brother. He's no one's lover. He's a predator who uses people until they have nothing left to offer. And then he disappears. Cassie was quiet for a long moment. The garden was nearly empty now. A few marshals remained, securing evidence, photographing the scene. The magnolia arch swayed gently in the harbor breeze, its beauty obscene in the context of what had occurred beneath it. Dad. Cassie's voice steadied slightly. Something shifting behind her eyes. The woman you mentioned. Patricia Voss. In Savannah. What happened to her? I chose my words carefully. Patricia Voss was a wealthy widow who became involved with a man calling himself Daniel Reed. She gave him nearly $500,000. When she discovered the theft, she fell down a staircase in her home and died. Daniel Reed disappeared the next day. I paused. Daniel Reed was Nathan. Cassie's face went white. Absolutely bloodless. He killed her. We believe so. The case has been reopened. She looked at the garden gate, where Nathan had been led away in handcuffs, then back at me. When she spoke, her voice carried a new quality, not the trembling weakness of a victim, something harder, something that reminded me painfully of Maggie. He would have killed me too, wouldn't he? Once I wasn't useful anymore. Once the money was gone and I was the only witness. I nodded slowly. Yes, sweetheart. I believe he would have. Torres spoke again, her voice measured. Miss Davenport, the U.S. Attorney's Office is prepared to offer full cooperation terms. You testify against Nathan. Provide complete details of every conversation, every document you signed, everything you witnessed. In exchange, federal charges against you are reduced to probation and community service. No prison time. Cassie did not hesitate. She looked at Torres with eyes that had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I'll do it. Everything. Every conversation. Every document. Every lie he told me. Her voice hardened further. I want him to spend the rest of his life in a cell. I want him to know that the pawn he sacrificed is the one who put him there. Torres nodded. We'll need you at the field office tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. I'll be there. Torres stood and walked away, speaking quietly into her earpiece. I remained on the ground beside my daughter. The harbor wind picked up, carrying salt and the sound of distant boat engines. Normal sounds for an abnormal day. Cassie turned to me. Her makeup was destroyed, her dress torn, her hair falling from its careful arrangement. She looked broken and beautiful and impossibly young. Dad, I'm so sorry. The words cracked open. For everything. For the documents I signed. For not telling you when I knew something was wrong. For choosing him over you. For her voice dissolved. I opened my arms. She collapsed against my chest, sobbing with the full body abandon of a child who has been lost and finally found. I held her on that white runner, surrounded by fallen petals and abandoned chairs, two people clinging to each other in the wreckage of a family that had been burning for 20 years without either of them knowing. We'll get through this, I whispered. Together. Slowly. But we'll get through. The federal courthouse in downtown Charleston smelled like old wood and new justice. 1 week after the wedding that never was, I sat in the third row of courtroom 4 at the J. Waddy's Waring Federal Building. Wearing the same charcoal suit I had worn when I said those 2 words. The silver cufflinks caught the fluorescent light. Maggie's cufflinks. I kept them on because I needed her close, needed to believe she could see what I was doing and understand why I had done it this way. Nathan Hale, I could no longer call him. Davenport stood behind the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. his wrists chained to a belly belt. The charm was gone. His jaw was unshaven, his eyes hollow, and the theatrical warmth that had fooled 300 guests, fooled Cassie, fooled me for 20 years, had evaporated like morning dew off the harbor. He looked exactly like what he was. A predator stripped of his costume. United States Attorney Rebecca Harmon read the charges in a flat, clinical voice that made them sound even more devastating. 18 federal counts. Wire fraud. 7 counts. Money laundering. 4 counts. Aggravated identity theft. 3 counts. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse. 1 count. Distribution of controlled substances. 2 counts. Attempted murder by poisoning. 1 count. Each number landed like a surgeon's blade. Precise and irreversible. I should know. I spent 30 years holding that blade. Judge Raymond Cross had recused himself due to our personal relationship. The Honorable Catherine Whitfield presided instead, a 61-year-old appointee with steel-gray hair and a reputation for merciless sentencing in financial crimes. When she asked Nathan if he wished to address the court, he turned and looked directly at me. 20 years of shared meals, holidays, laughter, and lies compressed into a single stare. He said nothing. Judge Whitfield sentenced him to 27 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of the stenographer's keys. Megan Holt received her own hearing 3 days later. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy and money laundering in exchange for testimony against Nathan's upstream opioid suppliers. The deal gave her 8 years at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee. When the marshals led her out, she passed Cassie in the hallway. Megan opened her mouth as if to speak. Cassie looked through her like she was glass. Dr. Franklin Webb lost his medical license the same week. The South Carolina Board of Medical Examiners held an emergency revocation hearing after the DEA presented evidence of his fraudulent psychiatric evaluations and the $80,000 bribe from Nathan. Webb received a separate federal indictment for healthcare fraud and obstruction of justice. His attorney negotiated a plea: 6 years, surrender of his downtown practice, and lifetime prohibition from treating patients. I felt nothing watching his name removed from the registry. He had looked me in the eye at a Christmas party 3 years ago and shaken my hand while plotting to declare me insane. The money came back slowly, the way stolen things always do. Agent Torres called on a Tuesday morning to report that $1.4 million of the $1.8 million Nathan had siphoned through his shell companies had been frozen and was undergoing federal asset recovery proceedings. The Davenport family trust remained intact. The marriage had never been completed, so the trigger clause was void. Gerald Hoffman estimated I would recover approximately 92% of the stolen funds within 18 months. The remaining 8% had been spent. Cash withdrawals, Megan's apartment, Marcus Vance's fee, and Webb's bribe. I told Torres I could live without it. Cassie's situation was more complicated. She had signed documents under Nathan's pressure guardianship papers, trust amendments, a power of attorney that technically constituted participation in fraud. Torres had promised cooperation credit, and the U.S. attorney honored that promise. Cassie received 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service at a Charleston domestic violence shelter, and mandatory therapy sessions twice weekly. No prison time. When the judge read the sentence, Cassie closed her eyes and exhaled like someone surfacing from deep water. But safety was another matter entirely. Nathan's opioid network extended beyond Charleston. Torres identified at least 2 associates who remained at large, and Nathan's behavior in custody had grown erratic threats whispered to guards, coded messages intercepted in outgoing mail. The U.S. Marshals Service recommended witness protection for Cassie until trial proceedings concluded. I begged her to accept. She resisted at first, arguing she had already lost her brother, her best friend, her fiancé, and her sense of reality. She did not want to lose her father, too. We sat on the porch of the Battery Row Villa the night before she left. The harbor was black and still. broken only by the distant lights of Fort Sumter. Cassie held a mug of chamomile tea, never coffee, not anymore, and asked me a question I had been dreading. Did you ever love him? Nathan. Did you ever actually love him? I thought about the 14-year-old boy at Maggie's church event. The one who laughed at my terrible jokes and asked if he could see the inside of an operating room. I thought about teaching him to drive, watching him graduate, believing with absolute certainty that God had given me a son to fill the space my career had carved. Yes, I said. Every single day, for 20 years. That's what makes this unforgivable. She nodded, set her mug on the railing, and leaned against my shoulder. We stayed there until the first light crept over Sullivan's Island and turned the water from black to gray. At 6:15, a dark SUV with government plates pulled into the driveway. A female marshal stepped out and waited by the gate. Cassie stood, kissed my forehead, and walked across the lawn without looking back. The magnolias along the fence were blooming, white and perfect, indifferent to everything that had broken beneath them. I watched the SUV disappear down East Battery Street. Then I went inside, locked the door, and sat in Maggie's reading chair until the grandfather clock struck noon. The villa on Battery Row sold on a Tuesday in March, 14 months after the wedding that never happened. I signed the closing papers in a lawyer's office on Broad Street, while rain streaked the tall windows and a church bell counted 11 somewhere down the block. The buyer was a young couple from Atlanta. She was a pediatrician, he restored antique furniture, and they had a 3-year-old daughter who ran through the empty rooms shrieking with joy the day of the final walkthrough. I stood on the porch watching her, and for a moment the sound was so pure it almost erased everything that had bled into those walls. The house fetched $3.2 million. I donated $1.6 million of it, exactly half to establish the Margaret Davenport Memorial Scholarship at the Medical University of South Carolina. The fund would cover full tuition for 2 students per year from underserved communities. Students who might otherwise die on an operating table because no one caught their condition in time. I thought about Elena Hale when I signed that endowment letter. I thought about her every day now, not with the suffocating guilt that Nathan had weaponized, but with the quiet accountability of a man who understood that one failure in an operating room had echoed across 3 decades and destroyed more lives than he could count. I moved into a 2-bedroom cottage on Sullivan's Island, 10 minutes from the beach and 40 years from the man I used to be. The place had a tin roof that sang when it rained, a screened porch facing the marsh, and enough silence to hear my own thoughts without flinching. I woke at 5:30 each morning, brewed coffee, real coffee, no poison, no fog, and walked the shoreline while pelicans dove into the gray Atlantic. Some mornings I talked to Maggie, not out loud, just inside, where the words still reached her. Judge Raymond Cross came for dinner every other Thursday. We grilled redfish on the back deck and argued about baseball and pretended we were just 2 old men with nothing heavier than a Braves losing streak on our minds. But sometimes the conversation would drift, and Raymond would set down his bourbon and say, "You did the right thing, Will. You know that." And I would nod, because I believed it. I had to believe it. Nathan's appeals were denied twice. His attorney filed a third based on prosecutorial overreach, but the Fourth Circuit rejected it in November. He would serve at least 15 years before his first parole hearing. I received one letter from him, postmarked FCI Edgefield, the same facility where he had once served time under another name. The envelope sat unopened on my kitchen counter for 6 days before I burned it in the fireplace. I did not need his words anymore. I had carried them for 20 years without knowing, and they had almost killed me. Megan Holt was transferred to minimum security after cooperating with prosecutors on 3 additional opioid cases in the Southeast. Dr. Franklin Webb died of a heart attack in custody 4 months into his sentence. I read the obituary in the Post and Courier and felt nothing except a faint clinical interest in the irony. A cardiologist's hands could have saved him. Mine would not have moved. The call came on a Sunday evening in April, exactly 1 year and 3 weeks after the wedding. I was reading on the porch, a volume of Wendell Berry poems that Maggie had underlined in pencil decades ago. When my phone buzzed with an unknown Portland area code, I answered without expecting anything. "Dad?" One word. 3 letters. And the entire architecture of my grief shifted like tectonic plates, finding a new alignment. "Cassie," she was crying. Not the broken, gasping sobs from the church floor, but something softer rain on a window, not a hurricane against a levee. She told me she was safe. She told me she had completed her therapy program. She told me she had taken a job at a nonprofit that helped fraud victims rebuild their financial lives. She told me she had adopted a rescue dog named Copper who slept at her feet every night. And then she said the words I had stopped hoping to hear. "I'm sorry, Dad. For all of it. For not telling you sooner. For signing those papers. For believing him instead of you. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. The marsh wind carried salt and pluff mud and the faint sound of an outgoing tide. I thought about the girl who used to sit on my shoulders at Fort Sumter, pointing at ships and asking where they were going. I thought about the woman in the white dress who almost married a ghost. I thought about the voice on the other end of this phone, alive and healing in a city I had never visited, building something real from the wreckage of something false. "You don't owe me an apology, sweetheart. You owe yourself a life. Go live it." She laughed through the tears. "Can I visit? Maybe in June? I want you to meet Copper. I'll leave the porch light on." We talked for 43 minutes. When I hung up, the sky over Sullivan's Island had turned the color of ripe peaches, and the first stars were pressing through like pinpricks in dark velvet. I sat there until full dark, listening to the marsh breathe. And I understood something I had missed during all those years of surgery and precision and control. You cannot cut away betrayal the way you cut away disease. It stays in the tissue. It becomes part of the body. But the body, if you are patient and stubborn and willing to bleed, learns to grow around it. I set Maggie's book on the railing, went inside, and turned on the porch light. God gives us children so we learn that love is not a surgery. It is not something we perform with steady hands and perfect technique. It is something that happens to us, and we survive it, and we wake up the next morning still willing to try. That is the only miracle I have ever witnessed in 65 years on this earth. Not the ones on the operating table, the ones at the kitchen table, the ones on a Sunday evening phone call from Portland. The porch light stayed on all night, and for the first time in 2 years I slept without dreaming.